It says starting. I think we are live. Yay! Thank you for being here. I have Alexandra Jamieson here, and I'm stoked to talk to her. We already got into some good dialogue before we hit live, so I'm glad it's 6:30. And oh, you know what? I have some feedback. Hold on. Oh, you know what? This is why. It's because I'm playing my YouTube video in the back. All right. I'm good now. Okay, back to the introduction. Okay, so I am here with Alexandra, and I'm stoked to have her. We already got into some great conversation before we started. So I'm glad I was able to hit that record button and get right into the conversation. We only have about an hour today, so we have a lot to talk about. So thank you for being here, Alex. I appreciate your time.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, I think your story is a great one because I think these days a lot of people want to put themselves out there and just put their true self and their authentic self out there. But, you know, being that a lot of things are online these days in the social media world, people are scared of judgment. I know I've felt that myself. You're scared to kind of show up fully with fear of, what's on the other side and the keyboard warriors out there. And I think your story is an excellent one that speaks to being involved in a highly ideological group at one point in your life and sort of formally announcing your exit and then dealing with the aftermath of that and then using that as a rebirth to recreate yourself. And now you've been doing a lot of cool stuff for a long time, but now it seems like you're tapping into more of your creative side. And that's something I think a lot of us want to move towards, is away from feeling like we fear judgment, we fear what other people think, show up authentically and be more creative and get in touch with what our inner truth is. So just to dive right in, if you want to get started and talk about wherever you want to start in your journey, but something notable is actually so hilarious. I put on Amazon Prime the other night, right? The first recommendation was Super Size Me. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, Amazon knows that I am going to talk to Alex here in a couple of days.
Reading our minds now.
It's so creepy. But I saw that. And I've seen the documentary before. I feel like everybody knows about that documentary. And if you want to start with talking about kind of what led you up to, and for those listening, just to do an introduction, I'm going to introduce her on the intro, but Alex, she is a co-star and co-founder of the documentary Super Size Me. And she did that. How long ago was that? That was...
we filmed in 2003.
Okay.
And the movie came out at Sundance in 2004.
Okay. And yeah, she was basically heading a vegan movement, if you will. She was vegan back then, but I'm going to let her talk about her story. So if you just want to kind of start with Super Size Me, what led you to do that, and then the transition after that.
So I actually have to go way back because I was raised on an old farm outside of Portland, Oregon. My mom had an organic gardening radio show every week for 10 years growing up. So I grew up with total hippies, learning how to grow my own food my whole life. But I was also a serious sugar fiend. I actually started going to Sunday school at the church down the road. I went by myself to church. My family didn't go to church because I found out the kids at Sunday school got cookies and Kool-Aid, and we didn't have junk food in our house. So I went to church every week, not to learn about Christ, for the Kool-Aid.
Wow.
Literally. So by the time I got to my mid-20s, I'd been on my own for a while. I had moved to New York City, and I was really living on fast food and junk food. And I got really, really sick after moving here to New York. I was exhausted. I was depressed. I had put on 30 pounds since college, and I was having migraine headaches almost every day for months. So through my healing journey, the first doctor was like, painkillers and Prozac. I was like, nope, I have too many family members who have medicated and, committed suicide because of masking their symptoms, etc. So I went to a holistic doctor someone we would call like an integrated doctor now.
Mm-hmm.
And he asked me what I was eating. And it opened up this whole new world. I was like, oh, right. Mom taught me all this stuff. Went back to the library, discovered veganism. I had never heard of veganism before. This was 1999, 2000. And I dove in. I'm a jump in the deep end kind of girl. And within a couple of weeks, the headaches were gone, the depression was gone, the fog lifted, the weight just melted off over the next couple of months. And I was like, this is it. Everyone should be vegan. Oh my God, this will save the world. Watch out when you hear yourself saying that.
Oh, I can relate to that. I've done that with probably every single diet or, way of eating that that I've tried.
Yeah, and veganism particularly comes with this great morality clause also, where you're like, I'm being good to the planet and good to animals and it's good for my health. So I, again, jumped right in. I went back to culinary school. There's a specialized school here in New York City specifically for holistic and healing cuisines. Became a private chef. And about that time is when I met my now ex-husband, Morgan. He was a budding filmmaker. I was this budding food revolutionary. And we came up with the idea for Super Size Me together. Basically, when there was a news story on, it was 2002. There were two teenage girls in New York City who were suing McDonald's for their diabetes and obesity. And we were watching the news story, and he was like, come on, you can't sue a food company. Like, you walk in and pay them your money. It's your choice.
I was just going to ask you that. I'm like, can you even do that?
Well, they were doing it, and I said, look at how they market to children. They market to children in America the way that they're not allowed to market and advertise to children anywhere else in the world like they do here. And they basically tell us it's safe to eat our food for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So we got into this whole conversation about marketing and food and how the food culture in America works. And he was like, well, what would happen if I just ate it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 30 days? And a little light bulb went off over his head because he was trying, he was a film student, and he was trying to find an idea that he could make a project to really bust out, And I was like, dude, don't do that. Like, I just got my body clean after years of eating like this. Don't do it. But that was how we came up with the idea. I found the doctors to support the film, etc. And, we had no idea if anyone would ever see this film. We had no idea I had a pretty good idea what would happen to him. But he was like, what if nothing happens to me? I'm like, oh no, you're going to get really sick. Like, this is going to be horrible for you.
Yeah. I always wondered people that these people that put themselves through these, there was that one show where the trainers would try to gain weight and then lose it with their clients or something. They would add all that, they would eat whatever they wanted for 30 days. And one of the trainers got started getting heart arrhythmias and all this stuff because he had underlying, predisposition to it. And I'm like, it just had me thinking, I'm like, these people must have a strong why to want to do that. And it just like what you're saying with your ex-husband, it's like my first gut reaction is like, no, don't put your body through that. But he must have had a really strong why to want to do that.
Well, he's an interesting character for sure. But as you know, the film came out, we made the movie, he got really sick, we documented the whole thing. It got into Sundance, which is a huge accomplishment. And it burst onto the international scene. The film was distributed around the world. We went to over 25 countries the year it came out because it was the right idea in a funny, we called it edutainment, in a funny educational way. And it's a global problem. So it really captured a lot of people's imaginations, and it's still being shown. There's a not a dumbed down version. We basically took the swear words out and made an educational version. It's still being shown in middle schools around the country.
Wow. So yeah. when that came out and you said you didn't expect it to, you didn't expect people to watch it, or you didn't know if anybody was going to watch it, and then it just blew up. What does that look like? Do you just have people coming to you left and right? Like, oh, wow, we saw this here, come into our country and talk. What does that look like?
Well, I was really, really lucky. We both built speaking careers out of it. We both spoke regularly, got paid to go speak about this all over the country, all over the world. I was approached by a publisher to write my first book. I wrote 3 vegan cookbooks in the space of about 10 years. And I was really lucky that a friend of mine was a web designer at the time. He's like, you really need a web page with an email opt-in on it. I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, but okay. Like, so he helped me make that. And that was really, if I hadn't have had that set up, I don't know that I would have had the
Gotten all the
climb.
inquiries and everything, and
Yeah.
know how much you were
Yeah.
out.
Because I had gone back to school again. I love going back to school for things. I went to a health coaching certification program. So I was just starting my health coaching career when the film came out. So having all that attention, people are like, what's the best way to build your career? I'm like, have an Oscar-nominated documentary made about what you do. That's really
Yeah, well,
what
I mean,
happened.
that all links up. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, that sounds like some great timing or planning on your end. It's like you are all of a sudden blowing up in the health world. You're trying to do health coaching at the same time. And
Yeah.
then, so you were vegan at the time of doing this whole thing, the documentary and everything.
Mhm.
Okay. And were you strict vegan? Because I
Yes.
actually, I read some interesting things last night when I was prepping for the episode. It's, and this is kind of what we were talking about before. With diet, it's amazing how many people lie to themselves. I lied to myself for so long when I was huge into CrossFit and I would, do paleo, right? But I would eat whatever I wanted on the weekends. But it's like I'd walk around and be like, I'm paleo, I'm paleo. But it's like I wasn't really paleo. And I read something, it's some statistic. I don't even know if it's true or not, but 60% of self-proclaimed vegetarians ate meat within the past 24 hours.
Mm.
And what's interesting is that a lot of people that claim to be vegan or vegetarian, I don't know if they're fully strict, because I know a lot of people lie to themselves sometimes, or I don't even want to call it lying, but they're just trying to match an ideology or a lifestyle in their mind fully out there. And but then, so they're not as prone to the deficiencies that people who are strict vegan have. And then they shame, like, oh no, there's no such thing as a deficiency, you can supplement with this, this, and this. And it's like, well, did you eat meat a month ago? Because
Right.
that will surely help.
Well, there certainly is what I will call hypocrisy or just self-delusion. And honestly, all of the whatever slice of the health world you want to look at, I know, and I'll tell you about my vegan coming out story, my no longer vegan in a second, but I know plenty of people who have written books about being a paleo expert. And behind the scenes, they are suffering health problems and they've had to go plant-based or vegan. I know plenty of vegans who on the sly are eating eggs. And I think what it really speaks to is we have a real problem with perfectionism in this culture. You're either in it 100% or you're a fraud, which I think does so much damage to all of us because we're not allowed to fuck up. Sorry, can I swear on this?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
I'm all for authenticity and cursing. Go for it.
Okay, so we're not allowed to screw up. We're not allowed to make any mistakes. And when we are so strictly adhering to a way of eating or a way of thinking, it doesn't allow for any gray areas and it doesn't allow for your own personal evolution. So I was vegan for over a decade. I had my son. After my son was born, about a year after, our marriage started to fall apart and things got really, I've not been diagnosed with anxiety, but I tend toward anxiousness and depressed and depleted, and being a single mom and trying to figure out how to rebuild my career after taking some time off to have my kid. And I started craving meat. Now, at the same time, my menstrual cycle sped up to every 14, 16 days. I was totally exhausted and I was chronically anemic. So I started craving meat and I was like, I don't know what to do about this. And I've written 3 books on vegan health and cooking. So I know all the things you're supposed to do that are supposed to work, and none of them worked. No amount of superfoods or sea vegetables was making a difference in my body.
Well, and you're probably having so much shame with these thoughts, the cravings, right? Because I know in the community they call them like carnal cravings, and then they
belittle
you for it.
Yeah, it's like you're morally weak You're not committed enough. Well, actually, we are animals. We are animals as much as we are human. And I will feed my cat what my cat needs to live. You wouldn't keep a lion from eating a gazelle, you know?
Well, and then there's all these ridiculous claims of like, well, if you wouldn't go up to a squirrel and like, bite it, raw, like bite its head off, then, you're not like a lion. Cause like people use the argument that like lions like kill other animals, raw
Mhm.
or whatever. And like we were talking about earlier, it's like it's interesting to me how someone can prioritize their own perceived idea of morality over someone's health. And then you
Right.
and I started talking about it, the fact that it's impulse. People don't really want to look at what's going on in front of them and think about it and
Yeah.
take some space and be like, what is going on with this person? Is this person ill? Because I found your story on your blog that
Mhm.
when you wrote about your whole coming out thing. And
Yeah.
I was like, wow, the courage that this woman has. But it's ridiculous because reading your story, I'm like, this is black and white. She became sick and really sick, and she is going to have to take care of herself. But I mean, it baffles me that people don't understand that.
I think in this country, especially in the States, we still have a lot of really puritanical black and white thinking. And you're either good or you're bad. And the line between the two is very fuzzy. So we're really good at judging other people, and we're really good at deluding ourselves from seeing the reality of what we're dealing with. But I have always been passionate about personal growth and personal evolution and checking in with yourself and seeing, what's best for me. And as I came to discover orthorexic eating, which is different from anorexic, orthorexic is a strict adherence to a healthy way of eating, even in the face of evidence that it's not working.
I relate to that. I actually had a huge we were in a cabin like about a week ago, and I found the term orthorexic online, and it really spoke to me. I've been dealing with some of that kind of stuff lately with my own life of feeling impure because about a year ago I gave up dairy, gluten, processed sugar, um, strictly, and I haven't had it since. And I think the problem, or the marker of orthorexia is, I mean, there's a lot of things, but for me, it's almost the inability to eat those things and not
Mhm.
understanding how resilient the body is.
Mm,
Like when you can't, like it's like
yeah,
there's a block in your mind that's like, I can't do this. I mean, you can, but your mind is telling you can't.
right, right. So I want to come back to that point because I want to talk about the overlap between orthorexia and extreme eating in any way and women's sexuality. So earmark that.
Oh,
But
yes.
but I want to get into um, what happened when I kind of came clean or came out as no longer vegan, because I really struggled with it for a couple of years in silence. Um, I hid the fact that I was like eating fish and eggs on the side, and then I'll be like, okay, I'm feeling better. Like when I started eating animal protein again, I started feeling so much better. My energy, everything like started to come back up. But I was terrified, and I had all this moral judgment about myself, even though my body was telling me I was feeling better. And so I was doing this back and forth thing for a couple of years, and finally I was like, you know what, I can't be inauthentic. If I have this public platform where I'm helping other people be healthy, and I stopped calling myself vegan. I stopped saying, plant-based instead. Like I was like, okay, at least I can make that verbal change and not feel like a hypocrite, but I wasn't being fully transparent. So it took me about 6 months to write this blog post. I kept editing it. I'm like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. And when I finally posted it, I was terrified because I knew what was going to happen. I hoped nobody was going to see it, honestly. I was like, I'm just going to put this out there. I'm not vegan anymore. And then I'll just feel like, okay, I've been honest. And I woke up the next morning and it was, viral. And we all pray that our posts will go viral. This one, I was like, I hope nobody sees this. But thousands of comments, thousands of shares. I lost half of my community that week. Half the people that followed me and subscribed to my newsletter unfollowed, unsubscribed. And that's terrifying for if you know, that's where your client base is. But it's like, at least I'm being honest. And sometimes I feel like I should get a phoenix tattoo, like burning stuff down to have regrowth. That is apparently my vibe through life. Luckily, I had a couple of people with even bigger platforms see what was going on, and we were either friends or we were tangentially acquainted. People like Jonathan Fields and Danielle Laporte, they were like, hey, look what's going on. Like, this is, how are we treating each other when it comes to health and being able to grow, etc. And I got all this other attention from a group of people that wanted to have real conversations about food and wanted more ease and transparency. So it ended up working out beautifully. I got another book deal out of it. Again, that was not even in my range. I was just like, I have to be honest. I have to put this out there. And within 3 months, I was writing my latest book, Women, Food, and Desire, which, and I could not have planned how this was all going to go. I did not plan it to work out this way, but I was so grateful for the opportunity to take something personally really painful and try to help other people with it.
I think it actually speaks greatly to what can come out of being honest and authentic and speaking your truth. I mean, you did that every step of the way. Even your books on veganism, it's like you were trying to help people because it helped you so much, right? And then when you realize that, hey, this isn't really working for me, I need to make a change, there's that internal, compass, that moral compass that's like, I can't live with this lie, or not even lie, but just this hypocrisy. And then you go out and you're honest about that. And then look, I feel like, this is kind of a metaphysical thing, but you're rewarded when you get in touch with your truth deep within and you gain the courage to share that outwardly, despite all of the criticism and judgment and shame from other people that you are likely going to receive and you did receive.
Yeah, you can't know what's going to happen when you take a risk and be honest and put your truth out there. But I would rather have everything fall apart and be honest and authentic than try to keep a lie going. And when it's an interesting creative exercise as well. I would rather write stuff or paint stuff that I feel really good about personally and have it make no money or make no impact than do stuff just because everybody else likes it.
Yeah, but see, oddly enough, when you have a passion about something, at least this is what I'm finding, or I've found, when you have a passion about something, that just, it radiates. I mean, it radiates through your being onto other people. And now more than ever, I think people, or I'd like to think people, are craving that authenticity. I know I am. But at the same time, our brains, it's interesting how structured our brains are to kind of like follow the crowd and do what everybody else is doing. It's like the Instagram influencers, or like all these people that I see kind of just doing a copy and paste sort of brand, if you will, for themselves. And to me personally, I mean, maybe that's fulfilling for them. That's just not a fulfilling life, because I feel like I need to create things. I need to get in touch with my original thought and birth that. Yeah. I think everybody has that in them, but it's so easy to just fall into like, oh, this person has 250,000 followers. What are they doing? Oh, they're, taking pretty pictures, by the beach. And now they're selling products. So let me just do that too, because, and then it gets even farther, because it's like, why are people doing this? They want freedom. They don't want to work for somebody. They, they want to be able to go out and travel and have the resources and live their life. And it's a really weird cycle that is happening right now. And I find myself actively having to pull myself back from like, no, like, don't do this because somebody else is doing it. Do something that you want to do genuinely from your core.
And I read a lot of books by artists and by writers about the creative process. I'm really in that work myself. And they all say the same thing about this, which is, copying other people is how most artists learn how to be artists. We learn how to do still life like Renaissance painters, or, practice writing a story like Stephen King would write it. Like, you learn the techniques through copying somebody else. But in order to create something truly meaningful to you and truly original, you have to take risks. You have to take risks, and you're going to fail. You're going to fail. It's the only way. I also love comedy and stand-up comedians. I love listening to them talk about their process.
Yes.
And they have all bombed many, many times on stage. That's how we learn. That's how we learn how to be great, is by fucking up.
Yeah, and I love that you said the comedy process, because I've always loved well, I shouldn't say that. I haven't always loved comedy. Recently, I really started getting into comedy, and I listened to Kevin Hart's podcast with Joe Rogan recently, and he talks about his process, and I fell in love with the process. I had no idea what went in to, like a 1 hour special that these comedians put out. It's like Kevin Hart was talking about that it's like a 2-year process. He tests his jokes at all these different comedy clubs, and he goes through all these different iterations of like self I can't think of the word right now, but he adjusts, like, it's like, okay, this one's working, this one's not working. Oh, I can add this to this. And it's like this constant refinement process.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. I'm like, I just fell in love with the art.
A couple of great examples. Steve Martin wrote an incredible book called Born Standing Up. And he really goes into his creative process there. I mean, really, really detailed about taking notes and watching recordings and all this stuff. George Carlin was doing this in the 60s and 70s, and he like taught that lineage down to other comedians as well. And I have to do this, and I am so sorry, but Joe Rogan, Kevin Hart, I'm like, I am done with the toxic masculinity out there. I feel like there is a huge problem in the art and self-help world. I have another recommendation for, women especially, and creatives. There's a great podcast by Amy Mann, the singer-songwriter, called The Art of Process. And I'm just becoming really, really clear, like, who am I learning from? Who am I listening to? And I used to be really into Joe Rogan. I'm like, he has too many times, and this is me. This is not for everybody, but we have to make our own decisions about who are we learning from and how is this person showing up in the world. I'm like, I am not listening to Joe Rogan anymore. I am not listening to Tony Robbins. Like, where are the women?
What do you mean by, I'm curious to hear about, because like the toxic masculinity, I hear, because like, I mean, I don't know that that's necessarily a political term, but I'm not really into like, I don't stay up to date with like all the stuff going on with like, feminism and masculinity and all the terms, I guess, if you will, being thrown around. So if you just want to explain that, like, what do you mean, like, when you say toxic masculinity with Joe Rogan and Kevin Hart?
So I think there is more to say about this than we have time to go into. Sure. So you can definitely Google examples of what they have been, things that they have said and done that are a toxically masculine perspective on things, or how they will talk. They just have a lot of unexamined privilege. Now, Joe Rogan is white, Kevin Hart is black, two totally different realms of privilege, but there is masculine privilege, and they are not self-reflective and examining how the things that they say and the things that they believe and the things that they are promoting are, they've said stupid things about LGBTQ people. They have been homophobic in their comments. They have been, they've said things about women and about the Me Too movement that are really harmful, because they have a lot of followers. And when men listen to these things and are like, yeah, fuck Me Too, I'm with those guys, then it doesn't, like, the personal is political. So if you are about self-growth and evolution, like, we have to start looking at what's happening politically, because it is affecting us and women of color especially. And it's our job to, like, if we are really proponents of self-growth and evolution and equality in the world for our clients and our followers and our listeners, then we have to start standing up and calling out the toxic masculinity that we see, because it doesn't affect us so much. It doesn't affect me as a white blonde lady as much, for sure. But there are a lot of people who are being impacted by this and how much they get paid and working in toxic workplaces because the guys that they work with listen to Joe Rogan, stuff like that. So that's a whole other show.
No, it is. And it sucks because I want to get into it because I have so many questions because it's like the privileges have always been gray to me because to me they're hard. I mean, they're hard to measure and maybe you can speak on that. Not now because we have so much more to talk about, not enough time, but a lot of these things are very gray and I want to have talks about them and without concrete examples. See, if I get what you're saying. It's like there's too much to talk about here, but without concrete examples, it's hard for me to have an opinion of like, this is what I think of it or this is what I don't think of it. And, there's so many things that, I mean, like you said, it's like maybe you were alluding to what Kevin Hart, the whole affair thing that just came out or whatever that he did.
Oh, I don't even know about him.
Oh, yeah. Well,
his personal relationships, but the things he has said about like he would rather his, if his son was gay, that he would like, it would destroy him and he would have a huge problem with that, but making jokes about it. So he's been very, very toxic in that way.
Yeah, it's definitely like, I wish I had more time to think about this because I don't want to like, it's always a little daunting to like be,
But that's one thing that people love about you so much. Like I've seen the comments that people put on your Instagram posts and they love your authenticity. And I am like, if I don't know something, I'm like, you know what? I need to learn more about that. Like we are all learning. We are all in this process of discovering more. So the fact that you're like, wow, I need to look that up. That's awesome.
Well, yeah, I want to because like, I was actually having a conversation with a friend about this. God, I don't want to, I know we're so limited on time, but this is interesting too. And, a lot of things in the political realm are very, like, I find myself having gut reactions to. It's like, even the concept of even just the terms, it's like the term privilege or the term masculinity. And it's hard to define a lot of these things. These things are very subjective and it's hard to put like, okay, this is where someone has a privilege. This is where someone doesn't, especially on the white privilege thing. Quick story. My husband is white. He came here as a foreigner from Europe and he didn't speak English in Oakland schools at the age of 8, and he was literally tormented, bullied, had knives put in his face, gunned down, spit on, peed on daily. He didn't speak English. White boy, come back to where you come from. Now he has so much anxiety and he's so crippled with social anxiety that he struggles to even find a job. So people have told him he has white privilege, and it's absolutely wrong to make that blanket statement for everybody, right? So it's like
actually, I have to argue against that. He was absolutely, they were bigots against him. He absolutely experienced horrible, traumatic bullying, and it has lasting effects on us. However, in this country at large, on this planet, people of color are like, he still has white privilege, even though he has had horrible things happen to him because he was white. But at large, like if he gets pulled over by the cops, he is probably not going to worry for his life. Like learning about the nuances of white privilege. And I really recommend that, like going and listening to Black women educators, especially Catrice Jackson is incredible. Rachel Cargill, they're incredible. Like really reading their stuff and just listening to them, listening to differences. There are major, major differences. And I mean, I grew up with addiction, suicide in my family. Like there were times when like growing up in my family was super traumatic. We were broke. My mom declared bankruptcy twice. Like I did not feel like I had privilege, but I was white in a culture that exalted white and blonde, etc. So
do you think that's true for every single so for example, like you use the example of, my husband maybe not being afraid for his life when he gets pulled over. Do you think every person of color is afraid for their life or should be afraid for their life when they get pulled over?
Yes.
Why is that?
Okay, so here's where I have to like pause because I am not a racism expert. I am not a racism educator. I pay to go to the workshops of these women that I just mentioned. Like I am learning their stuff, and I am encouraged, like the way I use my platform is to encourage the white women that follow me to educate themselves on these topics. Like, I feel like I am such a newbie in this area, but I absolutely believe that it is easier for us white people than it is for anyone of color. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, and I think like you said, it's like you're a newbie, I'm a newbie, so it's not
Yeah.
necessarily like we can have a I don't want to say that we could definitely have a conversation on it, but it's there's so much to be learned about the
Yeah.
space
Yeah.
that I just don't know that it would be a productive conversation, at least right now,
Right.
on this stuff. But I
Right.
mean,
But I'm
things are
glad we had it. I'm glad we're getting into it, even just
well,
to inspire someone.
sure, and it's definitely controversial. It's not. It's sometimes it gives you the little feelings in your stomach, like, oh shit, we're kind of venturing into like different territory here,
Right.
especially territory that I didn't expect. But it's something that I'm still learning about. I have mixed feelings on some things. I have a lot of questions, but maybe we
Yeah.
can do another podcast once we once we both kind of learn a little bit more about it. But I don't really know where we were. I think I brought up Joe Rogan and Kevin Hart, and then you kind of
Oh
changed
yeah,
gears there.
we were talking about
Um,
comedy.
Comedy.
Comedy and creativity and being, being authentic and learning about yourself in public
Mhm.
and putting yourself out there publicly is so terrifying. It's
Oh
so
yeah.
scary. Because as you know, when we like we dig down into our soul, we're constantly looking for the truth and the next truth and what's my vision and really who am I, for all of us like growth junkies. um, we have to then reveal what we've learned about ourselves or who we are. And because we're human and we are hyper social creatures, one of the most basic human needs is to be in community, to feel connected to our tribe, to our family, etc. And so by revealing our differences, our unique quirks, or our new growth, it really is truly terrifying that we might be cut out, we might be excluded from the tribe or the family that makes us feel safe.
Yeah, and to speak on the comedy, the reason why I look at comedians and they're so I just have so much admiration for them is it takes so much courage to put yourself out
Yeah.
there and to I mean some of them talk about controversial things and that's like, that's just a part of comedy. I know people have mixed feelings on that, but even to just say something that you think is going to be a little bit controversial out there in this climate
Yeah.
and to just put yourself out there on stage and just say it, like just to have the words leave your mouth in front of an audience takes so much courage in and
Yeah.
of itself.
Yeah. Yeah. And you really do have to have this inner kernel of fortitude. Like, I believe in myself, or I believe that what I feel is true for me matters to me enough that I'm willing to be made fun of, called out, judged, thrown under the bus, whatever, by other people, because for me, it's more important that this be said, or that my own self discovery, my own relationship with myself has to be important, has to be the foundational relationship.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's something a lot of us are trying to find. And it's hard to find, right? Because especially I was thinking about this the other day with social media, we are conditioned to want external validation so much and
Yeah.
so much more than I think we wanted it even before social media. I mean, it's like everybody
Mm-hmm.
wants to be validated outside of themselves, right? It makes you feel good if you
Yeah.
write a book and a million people buy it. It's like, wow, you
Yeah.
feel in yourself, oh, I have something to say, like I have something valuable to say. But now with likes being just like at your fingertips and oh, let me just test this idea, let me test this story, let me whatever it is, and oh shit, I only got 80 likes or only got 100, like whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it just creates this conditioning for us to want external validation. And so when you put yourself out there and you bomb, like, comedians talk about, and I listen to a lot of Joe Rogan, so I'm just using him as a reference, but
Sure.
I know what you said about him. Um, he talks about like how he learned the most from his moments where he bombed. He
Yeah.
bombed for years and years and years. And it's like, it's grit, right? You have to go through that failure
Yeah.
over and over again to
Yeah.
work your way through it.
Yeah. And grit and resilience are two incredible positive psychology strengths that you can develop. Like if you feel like you don't have grit and resilience, and they're a little different. Resilience is the ability to bounce back, and grit is the fortitude to keep moving through. So they're a little bit different. But you can, even if you feel like you don't have it, like, oh, I don't have those things, you can develop them. And it starts with taking these little bit risks. But to tie it back to food and health, actually, like one of the ways that you get gritty and you develop your resilience is first nourishing and strengthening your own physical being. So if we are abdicating responsibility to books or experts outside of ourselves who tell us how we should be eating and taking care of ourselves, and not listening to our own lived experience, like, how is my body doing on a sugar-free diet? How is my body doing with veganism? Like, you have to feel and trust your own experience, and then be willing to follow the little nudges of intuition. And like, you know what? I need to eat this way. I need to do this differently for myself. Even though the books and the experts tell me I shouldn't, I also say, like, the diet that heals you is not always the diet that will sustain you. Like something that works for a little bit of time, relationship, food, work, career, whatever, something that works for you now might not work for you in 3 months or 3 years or 10 years. Like, and we have to, again, have that inner knowing, that connectedness to our own truth, and trust ourselves to be able to follow our intuition to make the next best step for us. So following your gut with food is a great place to start.
Following your gut. I love that. Even the little pun in there. Yeah, no, it's so true, because there are so many diet like fads out there. And I mean, a lot of them, or some of them, I should say, have actual substance behind them. It's like, the paleo diet can be good for someone. Veganism, I'm sure, can be good for someone else. But the problem is why are you starting it? And like, I look back at my own life, and it's like, I started paleo because I was in the CrossFit community, and I just like, and that everybody else was doing it. I wasn't really listening to myself. Or, veganism, it's like, you see, the documentary, What the Health, which is largely, propaganda-y. And after, I was
very compelling.
I was sucked into it initially, and I'm like, oh, I'm never eating meat again. But then
Right.
I kind of learned about it and did a lot of self-discovery. And a great example is last night. I have been for probably the past month or so, I've just been eating, like, I do like organic, antibiotic free, free range chicken. And I've been doing that probably, like, I don't know, once or twice a week. And I was like, I'm taking a break from red meat, just because I wanted to see what my body felt like.
Mm-hmm.
And over the past couple days, I've been like, I just been thinking about like a steak, and like, I don't really like steak, and I've just been thinking about it. And then, so we went out, we got, this expensive slab of meat, good quality, grass finished, carne asada. And I can't even tell you what life force I felt going into my body last night. It's like my body was slurping up the
I know
nutrients.
what you're talking about.
It's almost like, it was almost like a high. And I'm sitting there like, I'm like, it was so powerful and so profound that it made me think even further about like how powerful our intuition is with our bodies, and listening to our bodies. And instead of sticking to like a little box of like, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this. It's like, if you just listen, I feel like there's so much benefit in that. And there's not a one size fits all diet. And that's what I think the problem is with a lot of these ideological groups with diet, where it's like, you're shunned if you don't follow everything to a T, because not everybody, every person's body's the same, and not every physiology is the same. So it's like, how in the world is anyone ever expected to stick to something that may not be right for them? It just doesn't make intuitive sense to me.
So this is where I want to bring it back to the idea of food and sex for women especially. So from a very, very young age, we are trained out of the connection with our bodies. With food, it's like finish your plate, even though you're not hungry anymore.
Or eat vegetables, even though no one's explained to you the health benefits. It's like you don't like the way they taste, and they're just like, you have to eat them, you have to eat them. And it's like, but I don't want to. No one's told me why I need to.
Yeah, yeah. So we're taught out of an easy relationship with food. If you watch little kids, like they will stop when they're full. But we have this idea about how much kids should eat. So from a very young age, that happens. At a very young age, for girls especially, also, we are taught or trained out of, I say brainwashed, we're really brainwashed out of a healthy relationship with our body at all. We're sexualized from a very, very young age, or we're taught that it's dangerous, like your body is a dangerous place to live. You have one shot, like virginity still has the super high crazy value, even though we live in a super sexualized culture. We're also taught to ignore any boundaries with our body. I talk about two things, hugging and tickling, two things that I never did with my kid who's 12 now. We never did forced tickling. Like sometimes he would ask for it, but very, very rarely. Because when I was a kid, I hated people tickling me. I hated it because it felt so invasive and like it made me want to pee my pants. But it was something that everybody was laughing at me. And if I got upset, I was the one ruining the good time for everyone. So it's like tickling is allowing people into your space, and not for everyone, but for me. Like you're supposed to be laughing at somebody violating your physical boundaries, which quickly goes into sex, rape culture, etc. The other one is hugging. Like we never forced my kid to hug anyone. If you wanted to say goodbye, you could do a high five or a wave, or if you wanted to hug someone, you can, but it's up to you.
I've heard that there's a lot of benefit in the hugging. And a quick thing on the tickling, I've heard a lot of people laugh. I heard this. I don't even know if there's a lot of weight to it or if it's true, but when people are laughing when they're being tickled, it's actually like a really nervous, uncomfortable, you're letting out the laughter, not because it's fun, but you're very nervous and uncomfortable.
Right.
And so like not a lot of people know that though. So then when kids are laughing, it's like, oh, how funny, like, oh, how cute, but not really.
And it teaches us, fight and flight, right? Those are two survival strategies. There's two more: fight, flight, freeze, and fawning. Freeze is when you don't know what to do and you just like, your body shuts down because your nervous system is overwhelmed. Fawning is something girls especially learn how to do. It's giggling, it's laughing, it's placating somebody's ego to make them feel better for you not liking what they're doing. So we learn these survival strategies from a really young age, which get us out of connection with our own physical boundaries and standing up for ourselves.
I totally relate to the fawning thing. I am all like, I notice myself, like, especially lately, because I've been really tapping into what I'm doing and trying to watch my patterns and trying to switch a lot of these like pre-programmed things that I do, that I like to call them. But it's like so many times, like I'll like giggle or something like on the phone or whatever, and I'm just like, why did I I don't think that's funny, and like I don't even know why I did that.
Yeah. And I've heard lots of stories directly from women who were in a situation with a man that was more powerful than them. And, men are allowed to be angry and be powerful and dominant, and women are not really. We're still not. We're demonized for it, and we get punished
do you
for
think
it.
we're not allowed, like, in our own selves? Like, do you think we don't allow ourselves, or do you think that there is like, what if there is an external force? What is the external force that is creating this, like where men are and women can't?
Well, I'll take it back to sexuality. So my last book, Women, Food, and Desire, was really about how food and sex can be two of the greatest things about being a human. But they're the two things that we are most fucked up around. It goes back to this really early.
I will agree with that. I understand that.
Yeah. So boys are mostly encouraged to be, go for what you want, be aggressive, chase her, etc. It's okay to be, a sexual creature, to masturbate, right? There's joking about it. Girls are not. If you even step your toe into that, then you're a slut and you deserve whatever you get. And sexuality is one of the most generative, life growing, powerful physical feelings that you can have. And being in control of your sexuality and being able to say no, thank you, without fear of reprisal or violence against you. And there is a lot of violence against women from ex-partners and a lot of domestic violence that still happens. So us being cut off from our sexual power and just being able to enjoy it, to explore it. There's a lot of sexual trauma that needs to be healed in this country for men and women. Men and women are sexually abused at about equal rates. So men need a lot of healing around this too. But I speak to women, so I'm going to talk about this. Like, we are missing a lot of our personal empowerment because we have been cut off from, I know what my body likes. I feel fine giving myself pleasure. I can say no if somebody else wants to engage with me without fear of being hurt. Those are incredibly basic aspects of power in our culture.
And that's actually a great brings up a great question. Why do you say or write women with an X?
So I just started doing this in the last couple of years, really, because there are a lot of women who, and this comes from feminist movements, this comes also from LGBTQ, trans women especially. Like, there are people who identify as women or female, and some of this goes into gender expression, and some of it goes into, like, I want to feel powerful as a woman without it being about my relationship to men. It's just a way of acknowledging that I am a safe place to talk about that kind of thing. Like, most of my clients, most of my followers are married to men, are cisgendered, or they were born in a woman's body with women's reproductive organs, and they express themselves in a feminine way. So they look and present as women. Most of my readers and followers are. But I want to make it clear that I endeavor to be a safe place for anyone who defines themselves as a woman to come and be able to talk about her sexual story, her food story, her creative passions and dreams. So that's why I do that.
So what was it that led you to wanting to speak to women? Because I always get intrigued by this, because it's like, for me, it's like you're choosing to speak to women instead of speaking to individuals. Is there like a passion behind a message that you want to give just to women that you couldn't give to like women and men or everybody?
Well, I actually have a lot of male followers. I have a lot of men who in the past have done my programs. Now I pretty exclusively work with women, and I love working with men, and I love men, right? I have a son who's incredible. My husband's amazing. Like, men are amazing. I love them. And women have a certain psychology. We have certain shared experiences that are based on growing up in these bodies. And I actually love that men read my stuff, because that means they're trying to learn about women's experiences and how they can be better supports. And my husband and I actually speak a lot together. We self-published a book last year called Getting to Hell Yes. It's actually getting picked up by a publisher, and it's going to be redistributed next year. And we speak together a lot. His business partner is a woman of color. Like, we are always in conversation about gender and about power and about education, etc. So I love listening about men's experiences from groups of men. There's nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. And there are certain things that women, like, we're still fighting for abortion rights across this country. That's specifically about women's reproductive agency. It's about us having access to really good healthcare across this country. That's a women's issue. I mean, yeah, it's everybody's issue.
To me, it's absolutely ridiculous. Like in Texas, I saw something recently that said that they're looking at making abortion like part of the death penalty or something. If like, yes, you can that, to me, I'm like,
it's crazy. It's crazy. Absolutely insane, but it's happening in 6 states right now. There are laws being passed disconnecting us from a right that you and I have grown up with. My mother did not have that right until she was already having children. So these things are
Well, I mean,
they're still happening every day.
parenting is a huge responsibility. Bringing a human into the world, especially in this climate right now, is a
Yeah.
huge responsibility. So to me, forcing people that may not be ready, or even people that are raped, or whatever circumstances are that you choose for yourself,
Right.
that you're not ready. I mean, a lot of it, most of it is in the name of religion, right? It's like you're killing a
They
life.
say
And
it's about babies, but they absolutely have no interest in helping you take care of that baby once it's born. This is actually about dominating women and taking away our power. Absolutely. So that is why I speak to women, because I'm actually here to wake women up and remind us how powerful we are, help us heal and grow. I want women to make more money and be stronger and healthier, because we have to continue to fight for the rights that we have and keep giving and spreading the power and privilege around to people who don't have it.
I have a question for you, and it's coming from like a place of, I don't know about ignorance from me, but it's a question that naturally came up when you were speaking about, when you say things like women of color, or a white man, or a
Mhm.
woman versus a man, isn't that, aren't those like aren't those statements divisive in and of themselves? Because a lot of what I try to do is focus on individualism. Now, there's things out there, there's racism, I get it, it's like you can't ignore those things. But growing up, i tell I tell this a lot, like I feel like I never saw color. Like, as weird as that sounds, it's like people will tell me different, like, no, you're racist, no, you have privilege, no, this. I've had a friend before who was like a radical feminist, like really into all of that, and she would tell me like, no, you have privilege, this and that. And I'm like, it's weird, because I just never feel like I saw color, or saw like, she
Right.
is a man, he is a man, she is a woman. And sometimes I feel like these terms, like when you call someone like a woman of color, or he is a man, or a white man, it's like those are further dividing us as being individuals, because aren't isn't that what we are? Like, we're all individuals with our own stories, our own pasts, our own experiences, our own biases, our own perspectives. So my question is, aren't those divisive terms?
So we are already divided, and living in this country is already harder and more dangerous for people of color, and not talking about it doesn't help things get better. So examine, and I know, and again, I am not the expert. I am still getting comfortable talking about this. I don't know if you know who Sean King is, but he is a Black social justice writer, and he talks about this every day. I really recommend you follow him, listen to his stuff as well. And one of the conversations that I was in the room for, that he grew up and he didn't know that his biological dad was Black. And he grew up in a white family. And he didn't learn until he was a teenager. And then he really started to connect with his Blackness. And I know him.
So he was adopted. So he didn't like. So no
No,
one talked
his
to.
mom was white. He grew up with his mom.
Oh, I see. So he grew up with his mom and then a stepdad.
Correct.
Okay,
And he
gotcha.
said, look, the difference, it's so hard for white people to understand this. And it's so uncomfortable for us. And it's going to be uncomfortable as you go into this self-education, because I really believe it's our responsibility to educate ourselves. And there's so much out there written to look up that's so helpful. He's like, look, white people don't talk about race in their homes because they don't have to. Black people and other people of color, they have to talk about it because it's their daily lived experience. So we're uncomfortable with it as we come to it in adulthood. Like, I'm like really learning the vocabulary and trying to get it all clear, right? Like, I feel like I've totally fumbled our conversation around race here, but I'm like, that's okay. I'm going to get it wrong. I'm not an expert in this. It's going to be my lifelong path to educate myself on this. So he's like, Black people have to have these conversations with their children from when they're really young. They talk about it all the time. So the other example is, we've been talking in my family about our kid has to have active shooter drills in his middle school, right? Across the country, schools are having to have these conversations with their children about what happens if a shooter comes into your school. This is happening across the board. And parents are terrified. And my Black friends are like, we've been having these conversations with our kids about the police and what to do if you get pulled over by a cop from when they're really little, because we as Black people and people of color are treated differently and it is dangerous for us. So we're just cluing in to what they're having to deal with and how they're having to engage with racism. So this is new and uncomfortable for us. And talking about it is not being divisive. Talking about it is how we start to heal it and acknowledge and listen. We have to listen to them and their experience. That's not being divisive. That is learning. That's healing for them and it's growing for us.
Well, I hear you on that. And I've done a premature, like a little bit of research, and I understand with all of the laws and all of the racism that happened years ago, like again, very high level. I don't have an in-depth understanding. And I understand how for, years and decades and even longer than decades that, Black people were put back, if you will, we were able to do more things, like go to school and vote and all those things before they could. So they are behind us, right? Like just from a historical perspective of, they haven't had all the years of privilege, I guess you would say, that we have had. So now fast forward to today, it's like when I look at all these issues, it's like I see that, and there's nothing I can do about the past, right? I don't think it's right. Like the person that I am in my skin today is like, it's not right. But if they have all of the same rights that we do now, there is still bias that exists. But what if we don't have bias? It's like, what do you want me to do? Like if I can't, what I mean, a lot of people say you have to acknowledge things, right? Like just acknowledge what has happened. Well, even if you do that, like what's left? I guess what I'm trying to figure out is what's the solution here. And maybe that's what I meant by being divisive or asking if it was divisive. I'm not saying you have the solution, but the questions that keep coming up in my mind are like, we talk about this and we talk about it and we talk about it and we talk about it, but what's the solution? Is it just saying this happened and this was wrong?
We have to educate ourselves about the past. We also have to commit to seeing every day how it's still happening. Stacey Abrams lost the election for governor in the South just this last election because there are huge voter purges happening. It's still happening in Florida, all across the South. Black people are still not able to vote. If you look at what happened, it is rampant. So it's still happening. Black mothers in this country are 3 to 7 times more likely to die during pregnancy and post-delivery because of our racist medical system. Like, it's still happening. And it's our white privilege that we can disengage from this. That is part of our white privilege, that we don't have to think about it. So it's actually part of our response. The first step is to commit to being aware of it and following these people who are trying to educate us, or trying to show us what's happening on a daily basis. That's part of it. And I'm so glad you're asking these questions. And I really hope that you'll be my partner in this, and us trying to show up and ask the question, what can I do? And not asking people of color, what can I do? But looking, who can I give money to? Who can I donate to? What movements can I show up for? Where can I march? Who do I need to call? Who are my senators? Who should I be calling about this? That is what we have to do. It's hard work and it's a grind, but that's how things are going to change.
Well, yeah, and I'm all about doing things, but as long as I don't want to say as long, how do I want to say this? I want to make sure what I'm doing, there's measurable, I would say measurable results, or a way to track success. See, that I hear you on all of the efforts, but for me, the struggle that I have with this is how long do we keep talking about it? What is the rate at which we can measure things to where it's okay, let's say 50% of people are racism right now. Is it when 20%?
No, we're all racist. I'm sorry. And how long do we keep going? Probably the rest of our lives. But this is not going to be healed anytime soon.
But see, the hardest thing with saying everybody's racist is you don't know everybody and what everybody's been through. It's that is
racism.
Racism
is
statement.
a cultural, systemic issue. It's a cultural, systemic way of holding white supremacy in power. So your actions, you may not see them as racist. And I don't want to think that I'm a racist either, but I have white privilege. I am always going to be part of a system that exalts whiteness until I endeavor to dismantle it.
Yeah, making a statement that everybody's racist, I don't know that I can get on board with.
I don't think everybody's racist, but we are the direct beneficiaries of a racist system.
Okay. So the system is racist, being like, and again, we're off track and I know you have to go. So it's like, I don't.
But this is important. And I hope
Yeah.
that there's women of color listening right now, or other white women who are like, oh my God, I need to learn about this. Or women of color who are like, yes, finally somebody's talking about this. Like, that would be good. That would be a good outcome to this conversation.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. It's good things to talk about. And I don't want to like, because we keep asking more questions, and I know we're kind of I know you had about an hour, and so I don't want to start getting off on all these different tangents if it's like, oh, peace, I gotta, because you have to go. But are you good on time, or
we should maybe bring it back to our original conversation.
Okay. Yeah, cool, no problem. Well, I mean, I think we covered a lot of what I wanted to talk about. We kind of got a little bit off track. I wanted to hear about the women with the X, why you do that. Vegan. I wanted to talk about your funny story. Maybe you can end with your 100 first dates story.
Oh, yeah.
That would be
awesome.
A great a little bit switching gears back to what we were talking about.
So when I finally started eating meat again, one of the reasons why how I was so sick was that my hormones were a total disaster, right? When you're chronically anemic, it had thyroid repercussions. My progesterone, testosterone, everything was off. And I had no libido. And I considered myself to have a healthy libido in my 20s and early 30s. And I was dead. And when I started eating animal products again, my hormones started to get normalized. I was like, oh, right, I have a body. I used to enjoy sex and I used to enjoy men. And I got some really good advice from a mentor at the time. And she was like, okay, you're ready to start dating? I was like, yeah, I think I'm ready to actually dip my toe out there. I've been with the same man for 10 years. I was just getting divorced. She was like, you're not ready to find your next husband. She's like, you don't even know what you want or who you like. You've been with the same guy for 10 years. So she's like, just date everyone and see what you like. Learn who you are again that's how we are. Humans, we learn who we are through our relationship to other people.
Totally. I'm on board with that.
Yeah. So I dated everyone. In about a year and a half, I had over 100 first dates. Most of them were first and only dates. I went on OkCupid. That was like the one dating app at the time. And on weekends when my son would be with his dad, I lined up 3 dates in a day one time. And there were times when I was like, I am done. These are horrible. Some of them were so awful. Oh my God. Some of them were so awful. Some of them didn't like me, didn't want to see me again. And some of them, I wasn't interested in them. So there was a lot of rejection and there was a lot of learning. And it was about me showing up and learning, how does this person feel? Do they feel good? Am I engaged? Is there an equal or interesting or attractive energy exchange here? And I'm so, so glad I did that. And I really gave myself permission to sleep around. If I wanted to have sex with someone, I did. And I was very safe. I'm a very safe and responsible adult. But I really wanted to learn, who am I? What do I like? How do I interact with sex and these different people? And when I met my now husband, Bob, it was about 18 months into this dating experience. And I was like, yeah, this guy, this is the guy. Very quickly, I stopped dating everyone. And I really said, you know what? I think there's something really important and valuable here. And it's been the best relationship of my life, for sure.
Wow. That's a great story. I mean, you were married for how long before first
I
marriage?
was with Morgan for 10 years. We were married towards the end of that.
So then that must have been different to go from being married for 10 years and then going on these 100 first dates. I
I
mean,
had
with
never
like,
dated in my life. I was a serial monogamist, you know, like I
yeah.
just, you dated a guy, but you were with him for 3 years, right? And I liken that dating experience to food. Like you have to show up to each meal fresh. Like, what do I need now? Who am I today? What does my body need in order for me to have the energy? It's that self reflective relationship, that self knowing. And dating was the same. It's like, how does this person feel now? Who am I? Like, without all the expectations, without the goals of like, I am not here to find a husband. I'm here to like feel how this is. Is this a good, healthy, fun relationship? So it's really about, self exploration and being honest with yourself and other people.
Well, and on a micro or a macro scale too, because it's like you can, like you said, with the first dates, you can tune in the moment and say, okay, am I having a good time with this person? What's going on? But then let's just say the dates continue and you have 2, 3, 4, 5 dates, and then it's like you're looking at the trends over time. Like, am I happy overall, like with this person? Because I feel like it's easy to get stuck in a place of comfort, with someone for like when you're with them for a while and you get stuck in that comfort, and it's hard to see outside of that
Yeah.
on a big scale. So
Yeah.
very good stuff. Wow. Well, yeah, we covered a lot. Thanks for being on the show, and I wish
Thanks
we
for
could
having me.
continue, but yeah, we're up on time. But to end, what I wanted to do is give you the platform real quick to talk about your podcast, your retreats, and something I actually really want to hear about, the how to write your fuck it list.
Awesome. So, Her Rules Radio is my podcast. It's been up for 4 years. I run retreats for women. I do one-on-one intensives for women who are ready to create their next thing, probably to make money at it, but it's a deeply passionate and personally creative project. So I run these rich creatrix and unapologetic creative retreats. And then a few years ago, like I went back for another certification in positive psychology coaching. And positive psychology is really about like, how can I think growth mindset? Well, for some of us, that's really hard. We can think about what's not going well. It's sometimes hard to think about what we do want. So I reverse engineered positive psychology. Like I wrote this free ebook. It's how to write your fuck it list, shit you're going to stop doing so that you can create the life you love. So it's positive psychology turned on its head.
I like that. I like that. I'm gonna look into that for sure.
And all of that is at my site. You can go to herrulesradio.com.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to link all your stuff in the what do you call it? Description box, and then on IG, people will be able to find you and all that stuff. But I appreciate your time today, and thank you for sharing your story. I'm actually going to go off. You and I will still be able to talk, but any parting words for viewers?
Yeah, trust yourself, and it's okay to fuck up as you grow and learn. It's going to happen.
Boom. Can't end any better than that. All right. Thank you, Alex. I'm going to go off live in 3, 2, 1.